Welcome back to Using AI. Happy ChatGPT Anniversary to you, everybody. I'm your host, Alex Den, and joining me today is Senior ML Research Scientist Alex Papadopoulos-Kofiatis. Hello, Alex.
Hello, Alex. This is another Alex-only episode.
It is indeed. It is indeed. I don't mind. They're as comforting as a nice hot chocolate. It's a freezing walk this morning, so anything to make me feel a bit cozier. It's been a year since ChatGPT has been released, which is sort of surprising. I can't help but feel like it's been a very long year because I feel like a lot has happened, and yet it's crazy how much has happened in a year. So I think I'm surprised. It feels like it's been around longer than a year to me. I don't know how you feel about that.
I agree. Yeah, it does feel longer than a year, both because it transformed business and what we're actually doing, and it transformed what we do in our daily life here at Genie. But also because, as you mentioned, so many things happened, right? So the pace of progress has been so quick that it feels this shouldn't have happened over a year period. It feels like multiple years of progress.
And to be fair, it was, right? There was a lot of work that went on before how accessible ChatGPT became, catapulted the whole generative AI category into, major headlines. So what we're going to do is we're going to look through some of its achievements, and then we're going to have a short sort of 5-part mini series where we do a little bit of a deep dive into the alternatives to OpenAI. The reason we think that's an interesting thing to do is that it's been, I don't know, what is it, 18 days since Sam Altman was fired dramatically as the CEO of OpenAI, and the fiasco that has happened since. But the reason I think it's interesting to look at alternatives is there are a lot of articles coming out now saying that the alternatives have had increased interest since the tumultuous news at OpenAI. So this episode will be solely OpenAI, but we will be talking about, the likes of Anthropic, Hugging Face, Meta. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch that we'll go through. I don't know. I haven't got the list in front of me, but there's plenty, isn't there?
Yeah, so I must say I'm not surprised that there's been more interest for competitors as well. Anything that destabilizes makes business feel more insecure, and looking at alternatives that will offer them a way out of OpenAI.
Absolutely. I mean, it happens with anything, like the drama that's happening with Elon Musk and Twitter at the moment. And I mean, it's so dramatic that he recently says he has said the most stupid thing he's ever said publicly, because he's realized that his comments can sink a multi-billion-pound business just like that, just by being classic Elon. Anyway, we're not talking about Elon. He gets too much airtime anyway. Let's talk about what has happened with ChatGPT in the last year. So apparently it attracted 1 million users in the first 5 days of its launch. And today it has more than 100 million users.
Is that active users, you think, Alex, or just like registered users?
Yeah, hard to know. I'm not sure they are incredibly transparent about that, because they do what they can to maximize their valuation and, to try and raise additional funds, I'm sure. But I think we can be confident that there are a large number of active users. There are definitely power users. I don't know how many million power users, but I think it's probably in the millions. And the OpenAI website is visited more than 1.5 billion times a month. I think it was back in January, and I said that I'd started using OpenAI more than Google. I think that's still the case. So I still have a lot of OpenAI pages in my history, and I don't know what proportion I am of the 1.5 billion, but I like to think of myself as a power user.
I think you're a power user, Alex. I think you use it more than I do, which is saying something.
Yeah, but you use other tools. You use other tools a lot, don't you, as well?
I use other tools, and maybe I use a lot more of GPT through the API rather than through ChatGPT. That said, I still do use ChatGPT, and I find it extremely helpful for some things.
Yeah, yeah. Nearly half of Americans have heard about ChatGPT, according to a recent YouGov poll. Sort of makes you wonder where the other half have been getting their information for the last of the year. I realize that sounds silly, but I'm genuinely interested. I mean, it's been such a sort of earth-shatteringly useful and interesting tool that how have those half of Americans not heard of it?
Yeah, I'm surprised as well. Because okay, we do live in a bubble, Alex, but at the same time, I've like my parents know about ChatGPT, my friends know about ChatGPT that are not in the tech space, and they didn't. It's the first AI product that any of them are aware about.
That's it. And we've all, I imagine, because we live in this bubble, we've been some of those people who, when you meet up with friends or with family, you just load it up and you show them and you teach them how to use it. And then you watch that feeling of amazement and wonder that it creates. And I think that's basically why it became so popular so quickly, because it is a wonderful, remarkable tool. So we shouldn't take away from that whatsoever. ChatGPT, or OpenAI, I should say, is more accurate because of API usage. OpenAI have recently passed sort of $1.3 billion in annual recurring revenue as well. So that is a massive amount of money that it is generating. And some would disagree that it justifies the valuation of 90 billion. I think that valuation might have come down a little bit lately, given the drama, perhaps. But that's the last stated valuation. And that's 35 times what the company was worth 2 years ago. And in the past year, to deal with the demand, OpenAI has brought on twice as many people as it had before. So we're now up to sort of 770, 800 members of staff, all of whom very nearly became Microsoft staff, as it happens.
That would have been interesting. Alex, do you know what the loss of OpenAI is currently? You mentioned what the revenue was, but that is not profit, right?
No, but I think that's a really hard question to answer now, because they effectively they could be paying inflated cloud prices because they're effectively paying back their hyperscaler investors. So it might be that actually, if they had no investment and they were purely a paying customer, would they get better rates? And the loss would be less. And then I think there's other ways to think about how they lose money as well, like developing GPT-5 and perhaps other models that they'll be working on. It's capital expenditure, and it would be harsh to put that into a loss category, although I suppose they would have to smooth
But
that out.
What I would be very interested in is for a paying customer, whether they're making a loss at this point or whether they're making a profit. I suspect that they're making a loss rather than a profit, but it would be also interesting to see how much that loss is now compared to a few months ago or when they launched ChatGPT.
Yeah,
but
it would be interesting. It would be very interesting
to give us hints into what kind of model ChatGPT 4 is compared to 3.5 and maybe the new GPT-4 turbo architecture. Yeah, it would be really interesting to learn these things.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that the GPT-4 turbo, that dev day, was probably the first mainstream, the first event that had mainstream coverage that they did, where everybody was sort of really interested in what they were doing. It's sort of like his Steve Jobs on stage sort of vibe, and I'm sure there's a lot of inspiration that he draws from Good old Steve.
There was
But
one before, the one where they launched tool usage that was generally exciting, and they showed a very Apple-like demo of tool usage, browsing, code interpreter. That I was very impressed by that. I don't remember when it was, though.
yeah, interesting. It feels like it's all a little bit of a blur. I have so far seen one GPT that someone has created that has actually looked really useful. I'll see if I can dig out the link for it and pop it in the show notes. But basically, it's a pain in the ass to find a domain for a new business idea, because not only do you need to come up with the company name, but you need to have the actual .com, or at least a good top level domain that you can put at the end of your business name. And so someone created a GPT where you describe the business that you are creating, and it uses large language models to generate possible business names and then only output them if the domain is available as a .com, which is actually really useful.
Yeah, it does
But
sound useful.
the vast majority of GPTs that have been published on the GPT store of OpenAI are effectively ridiculed as very thinly layered prompts wrapped up in this is a GPT and isn't this great? So yeah, not quite the sort of iPhone App Store Apple moment yet, but certainly pushing for it. Now, I wonder, Alex, do you think the topic of the timeline of what's happened with Sam Altman is covered or has been covered to death, or do you think it's worth just going over? Because actually you and I haven't chatted about it other than the occasional little Slack message where we go, this is hilarious and dramatic, and what is going to happen next?
I think it has been covered to death, Alex, but one question that still hasn't been answered that I'm really curious about is like, what caused it? There's no answer to that yet, right? I was reading some Altman interview today with The Verge where they directly asked him multiple times, so what caused it? And he just evaded that question, and he said that there's a due process that's happening and that he'll be happy to answer that question in the future, but not now. So I'm waiting for that answer. Maybe we can cover that answer when it happens.
I really enjoyed the speculation around what it could be, and I think there is no way it's actually going to be as interesting as we all want it to be, because
Maybe
of all
that's
the
why
hype
they're
around
still
what is
keeping
the
the
reason.
intrigue and the hype around it. Yeah,
we know various things that it wasn't, at least, right? The board actually spelled out what it wasn't. Nothing to do with it wasn't the result of malfeasance or anything to do with financial, business, safety, or security/privacy practices. So fine. Some people thought it was basically down to profit versus ethics. I think that's probably going to be too simplistic. And then some people were even throwing around like sexual assault allegations and stuff. But the fact that the chairman of the board, the Greg Brockman, also stepped down, and I think a lot of people basically said if it was a sexual assault allegation, there's no way that would have happened. So I think the speculation has been well thought out and is interesting, but we aren't any closer to the actual answer. Shall
yeah.
we?
Well, what's obviously on everyone's minds and the most interesting answer to that is that there's been some kind of AI breakthrough, right?
Oh, that is juicy. Yeah, I don't think I heard that much. What, some sort of AI breakthrough that they didn't think Sam was capable of running the company and handling?
Maybe, or something dangerous enough to cause concern and to precipitate the split between the commercial and safety aspect, right? I don't know. That's all I keep reading, but maybe that's my bubble.
It's interesting. I think that's probably. I don't think we're there yet, and I wouldn't understand why the outcome of that would be the firing of Sam. I think we're probably at least another year away from some big crazy moment like that. But I'm happy to be proven wrong, and I'm watching with bated breath. This thing moves quickly. What I would love to do is talk about some of the surprising things that happened during this timeline, and that have come out since. I don't know if you want to start us off with any that particularly surprised you?
One thing that did surprise me is what I mentioned before. So the launching of code interpreter, web browsing, and tool usage. I think that was a major moment in making GPT more powerful for business use. It unlocks so much potential, and we're using all those functionalities a lot at Genie.
I think the surprising things that they've done have been, I actually think this might be related to the ousting as well, which is GPT-4 was so much better. And GPT-4 Turbo, and I think the more recent model of GPT-4 just isn't as good as the initial GPT-4 that was released. And it's interesting to think like why they released that, because it wouldn't have been that hard. Like presumably, right, if they're a Silicon Valley style company and they follow, some Silicon Valley style practices, then a very good practice is to have a sort of pilot test group of users that you ship product to check if it meets their expectations, and they're super engaged, they're advocates, they want to know what's going on, right? If they'd shipped GPT-4 updated or turbo to those users, I think they would have come back and said this is an inferior product. And I mean, it's all over Reddit still. People are just saying, I hate this new version of GPT-4, it's just not as good. I don't really care that it's faster. I'm happy to wait for a high quality response. And they know that quality is important. They knew that speed was important to enterprises, but they really know that quality is what sets them apart, right? If you look at any of the comparisons of large language model performance, a sort of variety of prompts and intellectual tests or whatever, then GPT-4 consistently outperformed. But I don't think I've seen anything that says GPT-4 Turbo is better or the newer version of GPT-4 is even better. It feels like maybe it's a case of what gets measured gets managed, and they have been trying to optimize towards test results because that's what they think enterprises look at. I don't think it is. I think people just try the tool and choose what they want. But I wonder if somehow the release of an inferior product, and that must have been a massive release for them, has actually set them back, and that has caused friction within the company.
I mean, there's a few things to say here. One is that I haven't yet seen any scientific papers comparing the GPT-4 Turbo performance to GPT-4. So I'd wait until those kinds of results to decide on whether it's actually better or not. But even if it is worse, there's a balance to be made between how much of GPT-4 they can give out, like how much access, and its quality, right? So there's a chance that GPT-4 is very, very expensive and just cannot scale up. So a lot of businesses want to use GPT-4. We want to use GPT-4, but the rate limits make it impossible to use it in production. And maybe because of the sheer scale of the model, OpenAI hasn't found a way around that. So just cannot provide GPT-4 for production usage, right? Maybe GPT-4 Turbo is an answer to that. So better than GPT 3.5, but also scalable to production usage. So in that case, it could be a win as well.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I accept that. Because also we live in a bubble where perhaps not everyone is looking at minor changes in quality, right? If it's 95% as good, maybe most people are happy with that because it's still very accessible. It's got a good setup now. I mean, I remember if you go back to the month, or I mean, when did they release ChatGPT Plus? Because they basically scrambled to be like, oh, everyone's using this product, we need to monetize. And you can just imagine like the chaos that happened to set up the sort of the back end, but also the front end for business
for payments,
business users.
Yeah, I think it was in February, so a few months after the original release.
Yeah. Well, the other thing as well that you mentioned is the sort of rate limits, use in production. This leads us on nicely to, I think, probably in my mind, the number one OpenAI competitor, which is Anthropic. And I still can't believe that wait, actually, you probably know this better than I do. What happened during the fiasco when Sam Altman was out and they were trying to figure out what to do? And they just brought in the ex-Twitch CEO, because why not? What happened? They tried to bring in the Anthropic CEO, is that right?
So there was a rumor, I don't know how much of that is true, that they approached Anthropic to both bring in its CEO and also for a merger, right? Which would have been a major shakeup. But Anthropic said no.
So it looks like it's been confirmed by Reuters recently. So OpenAI's board of directors approached rival Anthropic CEO about replacing Chief Sam Altman and potentially merging the two AI startups.
I mean,
Anthropic
that sounds like a
CEO
desperate
Dario
move, right?
Amodei declined on both fronts. I just think it's a bold move as well. I can't really think of too many industry examples where you have this brand new category being blown wide open, the market leader saying, I want to buy a merge with number two. And number two says yes, because number two doesn't want to say yes, right? They think the market is theirs for the taking because they realize how quickly things can move. And I do think the market could be there for the taking for Anthropic over the next few years, for sure, especially if more governance issues come up like has happened on OpenAI. Although now Microsoft has a seat on the board, and apparently Sam has just confirmed that the priority is fixing the governance issues, which you can imagine him saying that because his life was thrown into turmoil ever so briefly.
I must say, I think Microsoft is the big winner of all this fiasco, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you wrote for the Cyber News website was bang on. Definitely the big winner because they just seemed like the good guy, but they win either way. But the fact that they would, I honestly, in a parallel world, the fact that Microsoft basically just got a free DeepMind, just pulled into their company structure. I mean, obviously, DeepMind is different, and we can go on to why DeepMind and Bard and Gemini and various things that are coming out of Google are also hot on the heels of OpenAI in a future episode. But yeah, maybe we should start to round off what we think about OpenAI and our ode to ChatGPT. Any final thoughts? Any particular fun things that you've done with ChatGPT over the last year that you were pleased by?
I think my number one thing would be that it replaced me as a data analyst for myself. Whenever I want to analyze some data, I don't do it myself anymore. I just go to ChatGPT with Code Interpreter and let it analyze the data, make the changes that I request, and build graphs for me, which I'm still amazed by. I know that we tried it together and it didn't work very well in a previous podcast episode, Alex, but for simple use cases, but laborious, it does work.
Yeah, and I've seen it work. I mean, I've seen videos of it doing a fantastic job at doing exactly what you described. From sort of as soon as Code Interpreter was released and people on YouTube were posting those videos, they were amazing to watch. I think for me, it's the fact that I'm still finding use cases for it a year on. It helps me to write parts of the podcast. It helps me to check my own work. It helps me to change the tone or the tense of content that I'm writing. It helps me to critique things that I've written, and I'll ignore, like, I don't know, maybe 4 out of every 10 things that it says, but 6 out of every 10 are actually interesting and worth looking at and going, oh, that's actually a really helpful angle to come at this. So yeah, I just feel like whereas before I would have really struggled to wear as many hats as I have to wear at Genie and get the work done to a decent quality, ChatGPT does actually let me achieve those things. So, people who use Spotify will be getting their Spotify Wrapped. I would love to see my ChatGPT Wrapped for the year and see some sort of summary of all of the prompts, all of the responses, all the conversations we've had. It's been a special year. I haven't named ChatGPT. ChatGPT sounds way too formal. I feel like I need to give it a name now because it sort of feels a little bit like a very trusty friend. Also, sometimes
Alex.
very unreliable and very dodgy, but mostly very trusted, reliable friend. All right. Lastly, what's this image you've got here? Is this? I mean,
So
I'm gonna describe this for people listening because we don't usually describe the images, but I actually think this is one of Alex's best images. So you can see this on our YouTube version of this episode. He has what looks like sandstone, beautifully smooth carved mannequins holding these perfect balloons of various different colors, and then this sort of strange hieroglyphic language hung down from banners like it's some sort of utopian world. But you generated this image, didn't you?
I did, yeah. DALL-E 3 generated this for me. The prompt was something like large language model anniversary. So this is an ode to the 1 year of GPT. I'm not completely sure why this is a language model anniversary. Maybe the strange glyphs, some kind of language, right? And maybe the mannequins are robots, or
maybe the mannequins are models.
Maybe you're right.
Yeah. But I think it's for how short the prompt is. I think it's come out at a very high quality. So I'm impressed with DALL-E 3. Mine is a bit ridiculous. I've got Darth Vader holding what looks like some sort of medieval flaming cross and a flaming lightsaber, and it's in the style of old manuscripts. So bringing 20th century sci-fi back thousands of years, and it's done quite a good job of merging the two worlds, I think.
I really like the nondescript but scary figures in the margins.
Yeah, I haven't given them enough attention, but they are disturbing, aren't they? I mean, they often are in these manuscripts. Yeah. Anyway, we digress. We'll begin doing our deep dive. I think we're going to start with Anthropic first, and we may have some juicy Anthropic gossip for you as well, because we happen to have been chatting to them recently, which is fun. So until next time, thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Alex. See you next time.
See you next time.